Do you ever look at your fantasy football team and just want to rage drop every single player? Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome back, Endgame community. It's Chris, and today we're going to talk about some players who didn't live up to expectations here in week 5 and maybe haven't been living up to expectations all season long. And I'm going to let you know, should you or should you not be panicking about them? All right, let's start at running back, and let's start with the big one, and that is, of course, Najee Harris. This is one of the guys, I had about 5 guys pegged as potential, league-winning RB1 upside this year, and he was one of them. Unfortunately, he's the one not living up to expectations right now. If you drafted Najee Harris, you're probably doing terrible. 0-5, 1-4, maybe you're 2-3 if you're lucky. Now, we knew this was a tough matchup against the Bills, and we knew with Kenny Pickett starting, the offense would probably be bad. But it seems like every week it gets worse and worse for Najee Harris. Only 1.8 yards per carry this week. On the plus side, he did have 3 catches, so at least Pickett did dump it off to him a little bit. But man, right now we just got to accept Najee Harris looking like one of the biggest busts of the fantasy draft. And if you have Najee Harris, not really sure what to tell you. I mean, panic level has to be high here, of course, but there's not a lot you can do. You can't trade him because his value is super low. You can't play him because he's not getting you any fantasy points. And you can't drop him because if he turns it around, you're going to be filled with tons of regret. So you just have to hold on to Najee Harris and hope it gets better. All right, another running back that looked like a potential league winner for a while, and now we're starting to see 2 weeks now where maybe this guy was just kind of red hot, getting some good opportunity, and that is James Robinson. People forgot, like, this guy was coming back from an Achilles injury because he was getting volume, he was scoring touchdowns. He had that one long run against the Chargers, but as we now know, everybody has long runs against the Chargers. But what have we seen in the last 2 weeks? Last week, Etienne out-touched James Robinson and looked better than James Robinson. What did we see in week 5? Etienne again out-touched James Robinson and looked significantly better than James Robinson, like on totally different planets. James Robinson only 2.7 yards per carry today, only 6 yards per catch. He looks like a guy with an Achilles tear. He really does. And I think people overlooked it and thought he was back because he was putting up fantasy points, even though he wasn't necessarily looking good on the ground. This guy leads the league in a number of rush attempts that have gone for 1 or fewer yards. And you know who was second? Cam Akers, the 2 Achilles guys. It's a brutal injury. It's a tough injury to overcome. And I think we're starting to see the talent of Etienne starting to rise up and starting to take over. And it's just going to get worse because, like we've seen with Breece Hall and Michael Carter, talent eventually rises and coaches can't keep talent off the field. I think James Robinson's time has come. I think we're going to see more and more Etienne. If you can, you got to try to trade him. But I got to put the panic level high for James Robinson right now. All right, I think we have to start viewing A.J. Dillon a little differently. For whatever reason, this week, only 6 carries in a smash spot, no targets, even though he was great. Ravaged over 6 yards per carry. Every time he got the ball, he was ripping off, decent runs. But Aaron Jones got most of the work. Aaron Jones got the targets. It doesn't look like A.J. Dillon is a guy you can rely on to be an every week RB2. Nothing more than a guy, with bye weeks coming up. Sure, he's a decent bye week fill-in. If you need him with injuries, sure. But it doesn't look like there's going to be any kind of breakout potential here with A.J. Dillon, barring an Aaron Jones injury, of course. And this Packers offense is terrible. They couldn't put up anything against the Giants in the second half in that London game. Just a terrible offense. And when they get near the goal line, shock. Aaron Rodgers calls his own number and throws the football. So A.J. Dillon, I'm also going to put the panic level high because it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for A.J. Dillon, barring an Aaron Jones injury. All right, this is the last time I'm going to talk about this running back. I might have said that last week, but now it's official, and that is Antonio Gibson. Brian Robinson is here. No, he didn't have a great game, but he got by far the majority of the touches in this running back group, almost all the carries. I think Antonio Gibson only had 3. Now, Brian Robinson didn't catch any passes, and Gibson did have a couple, but we know J.D. McKissic also catches some passes, and that's the problem for Antonio Gibson. If Brian Robinson is going to be the lead back, and J.D. McKissic is going to be the pass-catching back, what does that leave Antonio Gibson? Not much. And today, what did he do? Not much. And what is he going to do going forward? Not much. Panic level sky high here for Antonio Gibson. If for some reason you still have him, you haven't traded him yet, not sure what to tell you. Kind of like with Najee, you can't start him, you can't drop him, you just have to bench him and hope something changes. All right, let's move on to a wide receiver. Let's start with that Thursday night. I guess you can call it a game, but it wasn't really a game. And let's start with, on the Broncos side, with Courtland Sutton. Now, Courtland Sutton's been great this year. Wide receiver 11 coming into week 5. down game here. He is still hitting on some big plays, and he still is Russ's #1 target. But the panic for Sutton has to be the fact that Russ looks terrible, and now we just learned that Russell Wilson has a partially torn lat, and he's going to try to play through it. That does not put confidence in you. Still, Sutton clearly the #1 target here. Sutton looks like the best receiver on this team. Sutton is the downfield guy. He's getting chances near the goal line in the end zone. I can't put the panic level high for Sutton because he's been so good the first 4 weeks. I'm going to say panic level low. It just could be a rough patch here while Russell Wilson deals with this lat injury. Sticking with that Broncos receiver corps, how about Jerry Jeudy? What has Jerry Jeudy done? Scratch that. What has Jerry Jeudy done in his career? Nothing. Very, very little. People keep waiting for this guy to break out. Yes, he had that one big touchdown in week 1, and then he had another big touchdown in week 4. But outside of that, he has done nothing this year, and he did nothing again in week 5. And just like Sutton, he's got to deal with terrible quarterback play in Russell Wilson. The problem is he's not Russell Wilson's #1 target, and he's not catching a lot of passes down the field. Yes, he did have that one where really it should have been a big game, but Russ can't throw the deep ball with that lat, I guess. The problem for Jeudy is Sutton's the one here, and this offense, this passing offense that we thought would be incredible with Russell Wilson isn't. And I'm not sure it can support 2 high-end wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy right now outside the top 50 PPR receivers. Yeah, you heard that right. Outside the top 50. Not even startable in most leagues. So Jerry Jeudy, to me, again, a guy, at least until we see a better version of Russell Wilson, I got to put the panic level high, and this guy has to be on your bench. All right, let's stick with that Thursday night game and go to the other side, and that is Michael Pittman. A lot of people freaking out about Michael Pittman. Only 5 catches, 59 yards. But look, that was a tough Broncos defense, and Matt Ryan was under pressure all game long. I still was encouraged by what I saw with Michael Pittman. He had that one catch in the first quarter where he caught it, and then the defender made a good play, hit him, broke up the pass, and then he had another catch, I think it was in the third quarter, where he could have picked up some more yards. And if he makes those 2 catches, we're talking where everybody feels okay about Michael Pittman today. And you know what's really encouraging to me about Michael Pittman? Matt Ryan still looks very accurate. Yes, Matt Ryan has some serious problems. He turns the ball over, he holds it too long in the pocket, he can't escape pressure. But when he has time and when he throws the ball, he puts it where it needs to be more often than not. Not just for Michael Pittman, for all wide receivers. Matt Ryan looks very, very accurate to me. Sure, with this offensive line not being able to block and keeping Matt Ryan under pressure, Pittman's ceiling probably not going to be as high as we thought. But I still think Pittman is going to be an every week startable wide receiver. He's going to be very good. And look, from here till the end of the season, his schedule is as soft as it can get. He only has like 1 or 2 more matchups you really have to worry about. Every other matchup is great. So panic level low from Michael Pittman. Another wide receiver that let down in week 5 was A.J. Brown in a smash spot against the Cardinals. Only 3 catches, 32 yards, only 7 targets. Meanwhile, his teammate Devonta Smith, 10 catches, 87 yards, 11 targets. Dallas Goedert had a huge game. I know people are a little worried, like, can this offense actually sustain A.J. Brown to be an every week, top 10 stud wide receiver? But he's going to be fine. Everybody has games like this, right? It's not like every single player goes out there and smashes every single week. Even Justin Jefferson, for as great as he's been, had some down games. Things are fine for A.J. Brown. I'm not worried. This is still a great offense. Jalen Hurts still looks great. Better days are ahead. Got to put the panic level low for A.J. Brown. So last week I had Christian Kirk on here and I told you, relax, it's okay, he'll be better. He got 9 targets. And then week 5 happened. Oh my goodness, 3 targets on a day when they threw the ball a ton. Marvin Jones had 12. Evan Ingram had 10. And it's not like, he's had a tough matchup here playing out of the slot against the Texans. I don't know. I mean, I still think Christian Kirk will be fine. I think he'll be good. I just think maybe the first few weeks, look, guys go on heaters, right? Guys get hot. They score touchdowns. They catch tons of passes. It doesn't mean they're going to keep doing it all season long, especially when we're talking about guys like Christian Kirk, who are good wide receivers, but not elite stud wide receivers, like Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, etc. So I think maybe the best days are behind Christian Kirk. I still think he's a solid, wide receiver 3, maybe even a wide receiver 2. But Trevor Lawrence has been struggling. This offense has been struggling, and he's not getting the target share, or at least he didn't get it in week 5. I'm going to put the panic level low here for Christian Kirk because, again, everybody goes through bad stretches. I think it'll be okay. I think he'll be better. Just understand the guy you got in the first few weeks, probably not going to be who you get going forward. All right, I feel like I've had this guy on here way too much this week, but it's Terry McLaurin. And look, we knew there were red flags when Carson Wentz was the quarterback, but this week seemed like a great spot for him. No Jahan Dotson, no Logan Thomas, going against the Tennessee defense. And what did we see? Dyami Brown hit the 2 big plays, and once again, Curtis Samuel led this team in targets. This is a big problem for Terry McLaurin. Now, granted, he wasn't terrible this week, right? Like 12 fantasy points, I think, 12 and a half fantasy points. And that's kind of what he's been this whole season, right? He hasn't been terrible. He's just been okay. But he's not the guy you drafted. He has very little upside in this offense. And when Dotson gets back, it's only going to get worse because the ball is just going to spread around even more. He'll still be a guy you should feel okay about in plus matchups like the one we had here. Just realize probably not going to have a big ceiling week to week. I'm going to put the panic level medium for Terry McLaurin because he hasn't killed your team. He just hasn't been great. After a promising start to his rookie season, Drake London has kind of fallen down a little bit here in week number 5. I mean, we kind of expected it going up against the Bucs, but some people thought without Kyle Pitts, maybe he'd see tons more targets. He didn't. The problem here for Drake London is not Drake London. I think Drake London is a great player. It's the offense, right? They just want to run the ball. Marcus Mariota barely throwing, and when he does, he's not very accurate. So again, kind of like Christian Kirk, went on that hot streak to start the season. Now we're seeing him cool off. Probably going to be more like this rest of the season. He'll be fine in plus matchups, but in tougher matchups like this one, which hopefully you didn't start him this week, but in tough matchups like this, probably going to have to sit Drake London because this offense just can't overcome tough matchups. This passing offense definitely can't overcome tough matchups. So I'm going to say panic level low here for Drake London because it's not like Drake London is a guy you're counting on week in or week out, or at least you shouldn't be. All right, let's move on to tight end. And remember last week when TJ Hawkinson won your matchup and you thought you hit the tight end lottery? Yeah, you didn't. 1 catch, 6 yards. You know who TJ Hawkinson looked like in week 5? TJ Hawkinson in weeks 1, 2, and 3. And you know why? Because Amon-Ra was back. They had weapons back. They had guys they could throw the football to. And TJ Hawkinson, really, like, are you going to buy into the guy who had the huge monster game when they had no wide receivers going against a terrible defense? Or are you going to buy into the guy we saw in weeks 1 through 3? Well, I think it's pretty obvious the guy we saw in weeks 1 through 3. So TJ Hawkinson, I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know if TJ Hawkinson is worth starting week in and week out, especially, you know, if Chark gets healthy again and Amon-Ra coming out of the bye should be healthy. DeAndre Swift should be back coming out of the bye. TJ Hawkinson, like, what are you really expecting here? Like, touchdown or bust with this guy? So I got to put panic level high for TJ Hawkinson. And then for the second straight week, I got to talk about Dalton Schultz. Back-to-back games with 0 catches. And the game before that, not the one where he missed with injury, but the last game he played, only 1 target. And this has been an issue with Cooper Rush. What are we seeing with Cooper Rush? Doesn't target the tight ends, doesn't target the running backs. So for right now, Dalton Schultz is a guy you just cannot start. For however long Cooper Rush plays, you cannot start Dalton Schultz. Plus, we did see him come out of this game for a little bit, kind of re-aggravated that knee injury, still dealing with that. Hopefully when Dak Prescott gets back, things get better and Dalton Schultz gets more involved. But for right now, panic level high, and as long as it's Cooper Rush, you cannot start Dalton Schultz. And then one of the surprise tight ends has been Gerald Everett, but man, did he let you down in week 5. Even with Keenan Allen out again, only 1 catch, 2 yards on 3 targets. Not getting it done, obviously. He's been good for you up to this point, but the real worry here is Keenan Allen can't miss the entire season, right? I mean, he's got to be back at some point, I would think. And when Keenan Allen is back, that's going to really hurt Gerald Everett. So sure, he's still a decent streaming option for however long Keenan is out, but as soon as Keenan Allen comes back, you're not going to be able to trust Gerald Everett in your lineup. So I'm going to put panic level medium here for Gerald Everett, but if Keenan comes back next week, panic level high, you can't start him. All right, let's move on to quarterback, and of course, we've got to talk about Russell Wilson. Not only was he looking terrible, but now we find out he's dealing with a tear in his lat on his throwing side, and he's not going to rest. He's going to try to play through it. Wow, that should panic you right there. Russell Wilson has looked terrible outside of 1 game. Doubt it gets any better with this injury now. You have to have the panic level high here, and I got to be honest, in a 1 QB league, you can drop Russell Wilson and stream quarterback. Find somebody better on the waiver wire who has better matchups that week, because Russell Wilson honestly doesn't even need to be started in 1 QB leagues. And then I said, I think it's time we drop Russell Wilson in 1 QB leagues. Well, I think it's also time we drop Matthew Stafford in 1 QB leagues. What has happened to this Rams offense? They're absolutely terrible. Now, he did have a touchdown today, but that's because Cooper Kupp took it, like 70 yards to the house or whatever it was, right? It wasn't like Matthew Stafford was wheeling and dealing and threw a touchdown today. He looks terrible. The offensive line looks terrible. The offense looks terrible. Allen Robinson isn't involved. They can barely move the ball. And when they do move the ball, they rarely get touchdowns. It's mostly field goals, unless, again, like Kupp today makes a big play, just not really putting up a lot of points. So panic level definitely high here for Matt Stafford. And again, in a one QB, a single QB league, I think you can drop Matt Stafford and just stream quarterbacks who have better matchups. Now, I talked about Christian Kirk. I got to talk about Trevor Lawrence. First 3 weeks, looked like maybe he was going to break out. Looked like he could be a guy you could depend on most weeks, even in a 1 QB league. And as we've seen the last 2 weeks, maybe we got to pump the brakes on that. Only 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions over the last 2 weeks. No touchdowns in week 5. I think we got to understand that Trevor Lawrence just is who he is with this offense. In great matchups, you can stream him, you can play him. He's just not going to be a guy you can count on week in and week out. So I'm going to put the panic level medium here because hopefully you didn't think like Trevor Lawrence was going to be your every week, no doubt quarterback. But if you did, understand he's not, and you got to play matchups. All right, now that you know some players you should or should not be panicking about, you need to know who to grab off waivers, who to start, who to sit, who's going to boom. Everything you need to win your Week 6 matchup, we got you covered right here with our Week 6 playlist. Check it out.